Hello, David Moore, Equity Advantage, IRA Advantage. Once again here with my brother and partner, Tom. And he's going to be answering questions today. I get to ask him, so we're going to do the Ask the Experts between the brothers. So that'll be fun. And you won't have to listen to me talk quite as much. So today's question of the day, 1031, is do 1031 exchange options allow me to acquire replacement property in a different state than the state of relinquished?
And the short answer is yes. Section 1031 is a federal tax code, and it is recognized in all the different states, so you can exchange from state to state. We regularly are dealing with transactions from our home state of Oregon into California, Washington, vice versa. We do a lot of transactions on the East Coast, up and down the East Coast, New York, New Jersey, Florida, Maryland, all over the place. We do a lot of stuff all over the country.
How about foreign stuff?
Foreign, you cannot exchange domestic for foreign. So if you're exchanging out of property in the States, you cannot go into foreign property. However, you can exchange foreign for foreign. Foreign for foreign is considered like kind. Okay, it's not domestic for foreign.
Okay. So on that question, Tom, are there any other things that investors need to be aware of? Any other guidelines that might hit them if we're like in state to state? Is anything if you're going to leave Oregon and you think, hey, I got a great idea, I'm going to exchange out of California or out of Oregon with a state tax and go to Nevada or Washington State or Texas or Florida where there's no state tax, and hey, I'm going to save myself 10%. Is that something that's going to work, or what happens?
Yeah, it is a tax-deferred exchange. So ultimately, in the end, if you end up selling those properties in a state in which you have no state income taxes, you still are going to end up having to pay the capital gains taxes for that state in which you initially deferred out of.
So like Oregon and California sort of followed Oregon, they keep their hand in the cookie jar, sort of. I mean, so you can exchange out, you're going to defer everything as long as there's tax deferral, but if there's a future sale triggering gain, they're going to get it back.
At that point in time they will. Yeah.
They keep that hand, that cookie jar.
Yeah, exactly. They want their tax dollars. The other thing to keep in mind, if you are selling different property, or different states have different rules on non-residents of the state. Oregon has non-resident withholdings for people selling properties. If they're non-resident selling property here, then they have a withholding, but you can have that waived. So if you're doing a 1031 exchange transaction and you expect to defer all of your capital gains taxes, then you can have the withholding of the expected taxes waived. There's a form that is filled out by escrow typically at closing if you're doing a 1031 exchange to have those withholdings waived, and it's similar in most other states as well. So you always want to find out if you are selling a property in another state, if there's withholdings, you find out if there is a waiver for that. Typically there is for a 1031 transaction.
So if we look at it, and this is not something we were scheduled to be talking about today, but since we're on the topic of withholdings or what happens on a sale, what about, let's say, FIRPTA, the Foreign Investment Real Property Tax Act? We have to wrestle with that every so often, and in that situation, once again, I think it's something where it's critical that you talk to your tax people earlier, sooner rather than later, and we address these things.
Yeah, FIRPTA, if you're foreigner selling domestic property here, and FIRPTA kicks in, it's really something you've got to do some planning for, because it oftentimes will take 3 months or so to get the waiver for that. There's certainly paperwork that has to be filed prior to going into closing. If we get a call from somebody that wants to do an exchange transaction and they're a foreign party selling property here, chances are those funds will be withheld at closing, and then they'll have to come in with additional cash on the acquisition side, so that when those funds do get released to them, they can have that.
So what you're saying is, if we're in a situation where nobody's planned ahead or planned ahead far enough, that the FERPTA could trigger a withholding that's going to pull some money out that would be looked at as boot unless you put some funds in to offset it, right?
Yeah.
So basically the taxpayer typically is going to put the money in that would be representative of what was withheld, complete the transaction, and when the withholding is approved, if it's approved, then they get the funds back.
Yeah.
But otherwise they're going to have tax exposure. If they don't supplement with that additional money, what you're saying is going to have tax exposure.
Yeah.
So I think it's a very important thing to understand, that little nugget of knowledge.
And as you said, it's planning. Planning is big in any 1031 exchange, and unfortunately, it doesn't always happen. So anytime you're contemplating a sale, get in front of your tax advisors and talk to your escrow officers too to find out what sort of withholdings they expect to have, if any, at a closing.
Great. Well, thank you very much. Once again, David and Tom Moore, co-founders, Equity Advantage, IRA Advantage, and thank you very much for the time today, and look forward to having you back. Thank you, Tom, for joining.
Thank you.